Λοιπόν, νομίζω ότι μπορούμε να αρχίσουμε το δεύτερο μέρος που έχει τη μορφή ενός workshop με θέμα Unlocking Opportunities for Island Businesses, Practical Pathways under the new EU Strategy for Islands. Είναι ένα workshop που το INSULEUR θέλει να δώσει μεγαλύτερη έμφαση στο κομμάτι εκείνο που αφορά τις νησιωτικές επιχειρήσεις, τις οποίες εκπροσωπούμε από όλη αυτή τη στρατηγική. Επομένως, θα παρακαλούσαμε και τους εισηγητές να δώσουν το βάρος προς αυτή την κατεύθυνση. Δηλαδή, μην έχουμε μόνο μια γενική περιγραφή των θέσεών τους, αλλά αν μπορούν να μας δώσουν μια αντίδραση για τις επιπτώσεις στις νησιωτικές επιχειρήσεις. Θα ήθελα να δώσω καταρχήν το λόγο στον πρόεδρο του INSULEUR, τον κύριο Ρούσο, για ένα χαιρετισμό. Κύριε Πρόεδρε.
Ναι, δεν θα κρατήσω εγώ πολύ το μικρόφωνο για να δώσω την ευκαιρία στους καλεσμένους μας να μιλήσουν. Να σας καλωσορίσω όλους και να σας ευχαριστήσω που είστε κοντά μας. Να πω ότι 2 φορές το χρόνο έχουμε την ετήσια Γενική Συνέλευση και το Φόρουμ. Μία συνηθίζεται στις Βρυξέλλες και μία σε κάποιο νησί του δικτύου. Και όπως είπα και προηγουμένως στη Γενική μας Συνέλευση, επειδή περιμέναμε να βγει αυτή η στρατηγική στον αέρα, κάτι που έγινε τις τελευταίες μέρες του Μαΐου στην Πάφο της Κύπρου, ώστε να έχουμε πιο ολοκληρωμένη ενημέρωση, επιλέξαμε τον άχαρο πλέον τρόπο της τηλεδιάσκεψης. Δεν κάναμε μια συνάντηση από κοντά, αλλά νομίζω ότι στο δεύτερο μέρος θα μπορέσουμε να μπούμε λίγο στο κλίμα με τους ομιλητές μας και θα έχουμε την ευκαιρία, όπως είπαμε, στο επόμενο φόρουμ που θα γίνει και τη Γενική Συνέλευση το Νοέμβριο, να έχουμε περισσότερο χρόνο και για συζητήσεις και για αναλύσεις και για να βρούμε έναν τρόπο να ισχυροποιήσουμε ακόμα παραπάνω το δίκτυό μας με αφορμή όλα αυτά που συμβαίνουν, αλλά και με την εξέλιξη τεχνολογίας, όπως για παράδειγμα που είπαμε προηγούμενα με τον νέο τρόπο της επικοινωνίας των μελών του επιμελητηρίου. Να προχωρήσουμε.
Ωραία.
Και να μην κρατήσω άλλο το λόγο εγώ.
Ευχαριστούμε, Πρόεδρε. Το πάνελ σήμερα συνίσταται από την κυρία Θέμη Χριστοφίδου, η οποία είναι Γενική Διευθύντρια στην DG Regio, την κυρία Ελένη Μαριάνου, που είναι Cohesion Attaché στην Κυπριακή Προεδρία στο Συμβούλιο, τον κύριο Τόμας Μπαχάντα, που είναι Ευρωβουλευτής και Αντιπρόεδρος της ΣΥΡΙΚΑ, τον κύριο Νοέλ Φορμόζα, που είναι ραπορτέρ επί του σχεδίου της Επιτροπής για την Στρατηγική των Νησιών στα νησιά στην Επιτροπή των Περιφέρειων της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης, τον κύριο Γιάννη Βαρδακαστάνη, φίλο του INSULEUR πάντα και αντιπρόεδρο της Eco-Section της ΕΟΚΕ, και την κυρία Μαρία Γκαρσίες Σιραμών, που είναι εκτελεστική γραμματέας της CPMR Islands Commission. Πρώτα θα δείξουμε ένα βίντεο που μας έστειλε η κυρία Χριστοφίδου και στη συνέχεια θα κάνουμε μια αλλαγή δυστυχώς στο πρόγραμμα. Θα παρακαλέσω την κυρία Ελένη Μαριάνου να μας δώσει τη θέση της για τον κύριο Βαρδακαστάνη, ο οποίος πρέπει να φύγει στις 7:25 για μια άλλη υποχρέωση. Παρακαλώ, ας δούμε πρώτα το βίντεο.
Κυρία Σονίτη, να δώσω λίγο οδηγίες όσον αφορά τη διερμηνία, γιατί δεν προλάβαμε να το μοιράσουμε.
Βεβαίως.
Παρακαλώ, για να μπορείτε να ακούτε τη διερμηνία, πατήστε το εικονίδιο Interpretation και επιλέξτε την επιθυμητή γλώσσα. Εάν δεν το βλέπετε, επιλέξτε το εικονίδιο More και στη συνέχεια θα εμφανιστεί η επιλογή Interpretation. To listen to the interpretation, click the interpretation icon and select your preferred language. If you do not see the icon, click More and the interpretation option will appear. Thank you. Οπότε θα μοιράσω το βίντεο τώρα.
Σωστά.
Dear members of INSULEUR, distinguished panelists, and all who work for the well-being of Europe's islands. This is a milestone. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Commission adopted the first ever EU strategy for islands. This opens many new opportunities. Let us look ahead to what we can accomplish together. There are more than 4,000 inhabited islands across the EU, home to more than 17 million people. They are an important part of European identity. They enrich our economies and our culture. But geography matters. Many island communities struggle with transport, with public services, and with economic opportunities, especially for young people. These challenges are interconnected. There is no magic bullet. They cannot be addressed through a single policy or a single institution. This is why we needed an EU strategy. For the first time, it provides a common European framework for islands. It will guide EU action, support member states in designing better policies and investments, and ensure that islands are better reflected across all EU policies, all programs, and all future initiatives. The strategy is the result of an intense collective effort. During the call for evidence alone, we received around 360 contributions from stakeholders across 18 member states, as well as valuable input from European institutions and organizations like INSULEUR. My sincere thanks to you and to everyone who contributed. Your engagement helped us shape the strategy and its 4 priorities. The first pillar focuses on economic development, connectivity, competitiveness, and innovation. Under that, we will support better transport and digital infrastructure. We will also assess the specific situation of islands and launch an in-depth analysis of the cost of insularity, creating a stronger evidence base for future policy making. The second pillar focuses on energy, climate, and the environment. Many islands remain energy isolated, while also being heavily impacted by climate change. The third pillar puts people at the center. Many islands face population decline, aging, brain drain, and increasing pressure on housing. And the fourth pillar focuses on security and crisis preparedness. From the Baltic to the Mediterranean, islands occupy a strategic position within our security architecture and in strengthening EU resilience. In addition to the 4 pillars, governance will be supported as a horizontal enabler. But the adoption of the strategy is not the finish line, it's the starting point. Its success depends on all of us: Commission, member states, regions, island authorities, businesses, civil society, and organizations like yours. We encourage member states to adopt an island-sensitive approach at every level of policy making, and to make full use of policy and funding instruments, including the future national and regional partnership plans. Regions, local authorities, businesses, and civil society will make a vital contribution. Your knowledge, experience, and innovation will help translate the strategy into practical results on the ground. Cohesion policy will play an important role. For example, just last year, during our midterm review, cohesion policy redirected 1.6 billion euros to islands. This money gives a welcome boost to the priorities of the strategy, supporting competitiveness, water management, energy, housing, defense, and civil preparedness. I encourage all the partners to make the most of these opportunities, because ultimately success is not measured in strategies, but in better lives for the Europeans. This strategy gives us a shared framework and a common direction. Let us now turn our ambitions into action. Thank you for your engagement and continued commitment. I look forward to continuing this journey with you.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ την κυρία Χριστοφίδου για την σημαντική αυτή εισήγηση όσον αφορά τη στρατηγική. Όπως καταλαβαίνετε, εμάς το INSULEUR μας ενδιαφέρει κυρίως ο πρώτος πυλώνας, χωρίς να σημαίνει ότι δεν ενδιαφερόμαστε και για τους άλλους 3. Είναι όμως ο πρώτος πυλώνας που μας ενδιαφέρει και θα παρακαλούσα τους επόμενους εισηγητές για μια πρώτη αντίδραση, δεν θέλουμε τώρα αυτή τη στιγμή τοποθέτηση, μια πρώτη αντίδραση επί της στρατηγικής αυτής, με ή δυνατόν επικέντρωση στο θέμα του πρώτου πυλώνα. Επομένως, δίνω καταρχήν το λόγο στον κύριο Βαρδακαστάνη, τον πρόεδρο Βαρδακαστάνη, να μας πει τις απόψεις του. Παρακαλώ, κύριε Βαρδακαστάνη, έχει το λόγο 5-6 λεπτά. Ευχαριστώ.
Ευχαριστώ κύριε Ασονίτη. Θέλω να ευχαριστήσω και τον Πρόεδρο για την πρόσκληση και την ευκαιρία να παρουσιάσουμε τις απόψεις μας για την στρατηγική της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης για τα νησιά. Θα την κάνω την παρουσίαση στα αγγλικά. The European Economic and Social Committee warmly welcomes the strategy of the European Union for EU islands. The strategy rightly acknowledges the cost of insularity and the persistent structural challenges islands face: geographic isolation, high transport and energy costs, demographic pressures, and the exposure to climate change. At the same time, it recognizes the enormous potential of islands as leaders of the blue economy, pioneers of the clean energy transition, and the strategic assets for Europe's resilience and security. As many of you know, the ESC has consistently called for such a strategy through a series of opinions, most recently through the opinion adopted by our plenary following the request of the Cypriot presidency. We particularly welcome the emphasis on connectivity, clean energy, innovation, and social cohesion. These are indeed the right priorities. We also welcome the recognition that islands can become laboratories for sustainable solutions that benefit the whole of Europe. However, while this strategy represents a very important step forward, a milestone, it does not yet go far enough. First, it remains largely fragmented and relies primarily on existing policy instruments. Better coordination is welcome, but islands need more than coordination. They need a dedicated, coherent, and binding European policy framework. This is why the ESC continues to advocate for an Islands Pact, supported by an Islands Act, ensuring that islands' realities are systematically reflected across all European policy. Second, there remains a significant gap between recognizing the challenges and providing the tools to address them. The strategy identifies priorities, but it lacks robust implementation mechanisms, measurable objectives, and dedicated financial support. Without these elements, there is a real risk that islands will continue to fall between sectoral policies. Third, the ESC strongly supports the introduction of an insularity clause, a horizontal principle requiring every major European policy to assess its impact on islands. Only in this way can we move from occasional consideration to a truly integrated approach. Finally, governance is very essential. Islands cannot simply be beneficiaries of European policies. They must become genuine partners in designing and implementing them. Local authorities, businesses, civil society organizations, and island communities themselves must be fully involved. A stronger, place-based, and participatory approach will ultimately produce better and more sustainable outcomes. In conclusion, the ESC warmly welcomes this strategy as a necessary and positive step forward. But if Europe is serious about cohesion, resilience, competitiveness, and strategic autonomy, we must now move from strategy to ambition. Our islands should not merely receive support. They should be empowered to lead. The European Economic and Social Committee will continue to play its full role in advocating this agenda, including through our forthcoming opinion, in which I'm a member of the study group. We'd like to ensure that the specific needs, strengths, and aspirations of Europe's islands will be included in our opinion. And last but not least, we plan a study group meeting and a hearing in Syros on October 16, and we are going to have the opportunity to have the views from people from the ground, and of course to visit this magnificent island of the Aegean Sea. Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, κύριε Πρόεδρε, και για την σημερινή σας παρέμβαση, αλλά και για όλες τις προσπάθειες και τη βοήθεια που έχετε παράσχει στο INSULEUR όλα αυτά τα χρόνια. Ειλικρινά, χωρίς εσάς δεν θα μπορούσε το INSULEUR να κάνει πολλά βήματα στις Βρυξέλλες. Πάλι σας ευχαριστούμε και σας αποδεσμεύουμε αν πρέπει να φύγετε. Θα ήταν παράληψή μου αυτή τη στιγμή αν δεν αναφερόμουν σε κάποιους ανθρώπους οι οποίοι μας έχουν βοηθήσει.
Να δώσουμε το λόγο στην κυρία Μαριάννου.
Ναι.
Να δώσουμε το λόγο στην κυρία Ελένη Μαριάννου και να την ευχαριστήσουμε που έδωσε την σειρά για να φύγει ο κύριος Βαρδακαστάνης. Κυρία Μαριάννου, έχετε το λόγο.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ, κύριε Ρούσο. Με ακούτε?
Ναι, ναι.
Πολύ ωραία. Ευχαριστώ πολύ. Θα μιλήσω στα αγγλικά, αλλά βεβαίως ερχόμενοι μετά τον κύριο Βαρδαγαστάνη είναι πάντα δύσκολο, γιατί είναι πολύ καλός ομιλητής και είναι ένας από αυτούς τους usual suspects που λέμε. Βρίσκεται σε όλα τα νησιωτικά πάνελ και έχει πολύ βαθιά γνώση του αντικειμένου. So, I am going to speak in English, so it facilitates everyone's, I hope, communication. What I wanted to say is obviously what everyone has been saying from these people that have been in the panel, because we all are very much, people from islands. I come from the islands personally, so I'm an islander myself. So there is a number of good, if I may say, issues on the islands agenda, since we have now what Themis Christophidou has called the Common European Framework for Islands, which isn't exactly what the Parliament wanted to, in a way, this Pact for Islands, which was like the kind of Pact for Cities, Pact for Islands, Action for Islands, like Mr. Vardagastani said. So the islands communication is bringing together the different elements and some data of how many Europeans who live in islands, how many islands we have inhabited. They speak about island countries, island regions, the specificities of the islands, and of course clearly identify that one size doesn't fit all. There is also the communication on the coastal areas, and let's not forget, it's going to be the communication of the Commission coming at the end of the year on the right to stay. And I always believe that the right to stay and the islands, they are really very much linked with one another. Because when we speak about the islands case, the pact, the framework, the whatever, it is about making the islanders' life better. So the right to stay that Enrico Letta has launched, or the right to move, but also the right to return. It's a right which is a part of every citizen in Europe. So it should not make it difficult for islanders to be in an equal footing with the rest of the people. So I think it's very important that we are also looking into this communication coming out at the end of the year on the right to stay. And if we can influence that, it will be also a good process for us to work on. So we have this framework with the islands communication. We do not have any new funding opportunities. We do not have any dedicated funding for this for islands. And we have, as it was said by Mr. Vardagaskanis, this kind of a better use of the existing instruments. So this is a little bit what is in there, with some presentation of data about the challenges and opportunities facing islands. You asked us to speak about the first pillar of the MFF, which is the national and regional partnership plans. We need to say that there is a change. We navigate in different types of waters, and we know about navigation as islanders. So this is a different setting with a different way that cohesion would operate in the future under the new MFF, with the different national and regional plans. And obviously, this is how we need to be looking at the future negotiations, because as Cyprus presidency, we've done a huge amount of work to actually finalize most of the regulations on the national and regional plans, on the ERDF, on the ESF, Interreg, and all that. So performance framework. So we have really tried to adjust a bit the proposal of the Commission. And of course, still work is going to be done at the level of the European Parliament, as you know. So this is where also our focus should come from all islanders and organizations like INSULEUR. So this is a bit the setting. Now, there are different aspects of how we can actually utilize this islands communication in the future, because we do have in a single paper this framework. Maybe using the frame as we have it now from the MFF in the first pillar, but also the second pillar and the third pillar, if I may say so, because I mean, if you are going to have islands in an Interreg project, you still have the external dimension of it being paid by the Global Europe strand. So we could go further. We could really start asking for specific approaches to islands, like we can ask for island checks or island proofings, or there is island close, I think Mr. Vadagastan said. It's something we can still ask for within the plans, in a way, try to see that there is some explanation, some impact assessment, some way to prove that the life of the citizens has been improved, that the costs of the insularity have been reduced. So to make sure that these island concerns and what is really described in this framework within the communication is being respected somehow within the new MFF, within the new setting of the national and regional plans. Obviously, it's important to utilize this kind of, this kind of proofing, island proofing principle in non-legislative files across the board. And that's important. When I was in CPMR, we have been saying the same thing as well. We keep on saying, of course, in Cyprus the same, because it's a cohesion country and an island state. So this is important to have that in the legislative proposals, all legislative proposals. And when we make the impact assessment, to try to give some answers as to how the insularity costs have been reduced by the proposals we make. To what extent? Do we have enough material, enough proof, enough indicators to actually make sure that we can prove this? Who can say, yes, we have been reducing this with the actions and financings and legislation we are proposing. Maybe seek some permanent kind of methodology at European Union level to see how we can actually measure the permanent additional costs that islands have, and how can these be within the legislative proposals we make or the funding we are supporting can be reduced. So we could go even further, trying the negotiations and see whether we can insert some sort of island dimension into the allocation keys for what's going to be the cohesion policy allocation in the future. There are possibilities we can think of. I think what Themi said is that we now have some sort of framework, and we need to really go and think a bit out of the box and see how we can actually work with what we have. And if what we have is NRPPs, can we seek that there is a dedicated island chapter in those national or regional parts, chapters. It is possible. It's not something which is, it's part of what is being proposed, but can we actually make sure that these are there, and we can maybe use the possibility to have this integrated approach in this specific island chapter within the national or the regional plans. And then, try to see if, for the time being, nothing is being discussed or decided on the subject. As you know, the MFF is still going on under the presidency of the Irish, and we will expect to have some more proposals, nego boxes, as you know them, by October, November, and that's when the Parliament also will start working on the trialogue. So there is still some way to go. But I think it's important to see whether we can use some sort of ring-fence funding, some sort of positive discrimination for islands within the chapters, so to make sure that we have some possibility to utilize this in an integrated manner. So I think it's important to work with what we have, instead of just being totally upset about the fact that everything has changed, and then try to see whether we can find the niches, the possibilities for the island case to be made with the instruments that we are all saying. We are all using the coordination of the mechanisms of the instruments, the proofing, the island proofing, the MFF may be a specific allocation, or the dedicated chapter within the national and regional partnerships. We may even go further and think about the European Competitiveness Fund. Why not? Can we not seek dedicated call for tenders for islands? And can we not even go even further and try to ask that some smaller island communities could have a facilitating mechanism to actually be part, of these calls? Because obviously everything is about excellence, but can we not define that in terms of actually having equal opportunities for all member states and regions and local authorities to actually access funding of the European Union to be able to create some sort of positive discrimination for smaller island communities on this dedicated funding within the European Competitiveness Fund. I'll stop there. You asked us for some kind of provocative ideas that we could fly around and see how this can be taken on board. Obviously, organizations like yours will have a lot of possibilities to interact within this kind of strategic approach, discussion with your member states, your regions, negotiating with your MEPs, as now, of course, the negotiation is happening a little bit later on, and also follow the right to stay communication. I think it's also important for islanders to have their saying in that piece of work. Thank you.
Εμείς ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Ελένη, για την εξαιρετική παρέμβασή σου. Θεωρώ ότι τα νησιά ήταν πολύ τυχερά που είχαν εσένα στην Κυπριακή Προεδρία τώρα, όπως ήταν πολύ τυχερά να σε έχουν 13 χρόνια στο τιμόνι της EPMR ως Γενική Γραμματέα, και ελπίζουμε ένα τέτοιο κεφάλαιο, και θα θεωρήσω ότι είναι και συνέχεια του Ζαν Ντιένας και άλλων ανθρώπων που θυμήθηκα πριν, ότι θα είστε μαζί μας για να πάμε στη συνέχεια σε αυτά που λέτε, να εξειδικεύσουμε δηλαδή τα μέτρα. Ευχαριστώ άλλη μια φορά, Ελένη. Τώρα το λόγο έχει ο κύριος Τόμας Μπαχάδα από τη Μάλτα, είναι ευρωβουλευτής, είναι Vice President στην ΣΥΡΙΚΑ και ασχολείται πάρα πολύ με τις θαλάσσιες περιοχές, με την μπλε οικονομία, με την γαλάζια οικονομία κλπ. Κύριε Μπαχάντα, έχετε το λόγο.
Thank you, and firstly I would like to thank you for the invite and for the work that INSULEUR does on the subject that we are talking about. I will not go and repeat what was already said. I agree with everything that was said. And in very brief on what was said, and what I particularly agree on, is that the strategy is a novelty. It's the first time that we are seeing the Commission stating facts that we live every single day. We know them, we know that, we live it for many, many, many years. But the fact that the Commission is stating the facts and also going into depth as to the cost of insularity, for example, amongst others, that is important, and that is a novelty, and that can give us hooks to catch on when we are continuing our work. But of course, I cannot not criticize that this is very far from what is actually needed. And what we need are facts, not only facts, but now action. Action that we can immediately feel. Because if you are saying what the reality is, therefore it means that you need to take action. What is the action? The action so far doesn't exist. And I think the most important thing is that we start talking and pushing, and you need to help us push specific things that need to be done. Eleni mentioned some. I would like to mention others. And these others are already in official parliament texts that have been approved by political parties. I was the rapporteur of the economic opinion to the NRPP, what you are calling Pillar 1. And there we have ensured several things. Firstly is the economic governance of how the NRPP should work. And there, which would be very interesting for INSULEUR, we have sought that in the drafting and in the monitoring of the plans, the stakeholders have a strong say and a strong vote. Therefore, islands and regions and local councils would have a direct say into how the plan will be devised. That is something that has been approved in this opinion. I will come to that later. Second thing is that I went beyond what my job as rapporteur is and ensured that we include the realities of islands. And here I needed to negotiate with the several political parties to ensure that they do not cut off what I have proposed with respect to islands, because they easily could have told me that this has nothing to do with economic governance and hence should be gone. So it was a very difficult task to do. And I'm going to go very briefly, two things. Firstly, a chapter on islands. For the first time in cohesion policy, there would be the first time that there is a chapter on geographically disadvantaged areas. That is, islands and mountainous regions. That is what Article 174 of the treaty has always said, but never implemented. And this would be the first time that there is a dedicated chapter, just like there is a dedicated chapter for outermost regions. There would be one specifically for islands, which calls on the Commission to take into consideration the realities of islands when it is assessing the plans, because don't forget, the plan is not only the government that's writing it, it needs to be approved by the Commission. And that the governments, when drafting the plan, together with the stakeholders, they need to factor in the realities needed for islands. Even more specific is the co-financing rate. Within the report was approved by the majority of the political parties that islands, not island regions, not island areas, islands have a maximum preferential co-financing rate of 75%. This means that if you have a project, 75% would come from European funding, 25% would come from your own finances. I'll give you an example of why this is important. In the new NRPP, the values of co-financing have changed. And how one falls under which type of co-financing rate has also changed. I'll bring an example with my country. As per the Commission proposal, a project in Malta would have a co-financing rate of 40%, meaning that the European funding would be 40% and the funding from the government or from the beneficiary would be 60%. That means you are forking out more money than getting from the European project. Because of the permanent geographical realities that islands face, it's there, it will remain there, no solution for it, we require a preferential co-financing rate. And that is the argument that was put forward. And of a maximum of 75%. So 75% comes from the European funding, 25% comes from your own coffers. This is a very important step, but it is not the end of the game. Why? Because what was approved by the majority of the parties, that is EPP, S&D, Renew, Greens, and ECR, so that is the majority of the parties, have approved my report. My report is now sent to the rapporteurs of the NRPP and are obliged to include my amendments either in the compromises that they are negotiating or in the final voting list. And that is where it is very important. It is very important that you push other MEPs to help us not get these amendments killed. These amendments include the full chapter on islands, preferential co-financing rates, and the recognition that the Commission must take into consideration the realities of islands. These amendments are there. To further strengthen it, I resubmitted the same amendments together with 15 other island MEPs, if I'm not mistaken, from Italy, Spain, Greece, Cyprus, and Croatia. All together, we have resubmitted the same two major amendments that I have already been approved to push forward that the rapporteurs of the NRPP include the amendments that we are proposing in order to ensure that in the final legislation of the NRPP, there is what I am saying, that is preferential treatment to islands, with specific examples, not just a clause, what it actually means. And the clause would be very important, but even more than that, we need specific preferential treatment. And this is one example. And I don't want to go into more depth, but I wanted to give you tangible examples of how you must help us to push forward the agenda. And to push forward the agenda, we need text that defends the realities and opens up doors that so far are not open. Thank you.
Απλά χέρια. Αυτό καταλαβαίνω εγώ από την εισήγησή σας. Δηλαδή, είστε νέος, γνώστης και ενθουσιώδης. Αυτά είναι νομίζω τα τρία στοιχεία που μπορούν να προχωρήσουμε στο Ευρωπαϊκό Κοινοβούλιο, που πάντα ήταν υπερασπιστής των νησιωτικών μας αναγκών, και να προχωρήσουμε τώρα για τη νέα προγραμματική περίοδο. Θυμάμαι, κύριε Μπαχάτα, ότι στην προηγούμενη προγραμματική περίοδο 2027 προσπαθήσαμε πάρα πολύ να υπάρξει έστω και μια μικρή αναφορά στο islands, στα νησιά, και δεν το καταφέραμε. Τώρα, αφού μας λέτε όλα αυτά που μας λέτε, θεωρούμε ότι έχουμε προχωρήσει πάρα πολύ και θα είμαστε κοντά σας να σας βοηθήσουμε κι εμείς με όλες μας τις δυνάμεις, όσο μπορούμε, με στοιχεία κλπ, για την καλύτερη παρουσίαση των αιτήσεων και των απαιτήσεων των νησιωτών μας. Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ. Και τώρα δίνω το λόγο, έχω την ευχαρίστηση να δώσω την τιμή να δώσω το λόγο στον κύριο Νοέλ Φορμόζα, ο οποίος θα μιλήσει εκ μέρους της Επιτροπής των Περιφερειών. Περιττό να πω ότι ο κύριος Φορμόζα ήταν για 20 χρόνια δήμαρχος στο Σαου Λόρεντς στο Γκότζο. Όπως ξέρετε, το Γκότζο είναι από τα προτιμησιακά νησιά που έχουμε μέλη στο Ινσουλέρ, ο οποίος επομένως είναι άνθρωπος του τεράν και γνωρίζει πάρα πολύ καλά τα ζητήματα νησιωτικά, και η βοήθειά του και ως δήμαρχος, αλλά κυρίως τώρα ως μέλος της Επιτροπής, που ενδεχομένως θα είναι και εισηγητής για τη στρατηγική την ευρωπαϊκή, θα είναι σημαντική. Κυρία Φορμόζα.
Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. First of all, I would like to sincerely thank INSULEUR for inviting me to participate in today's workshop. It is a real pleasure that one of my first public engagements as rapporteur of the European Committee of the Regions on EU Strategy for Islands is with an organization that for many years has been strong advocate for Europe's islands and their businesses. INSULEUR has consistently worked to ensure that the realities of island territories remain firmly and on the European agenda. I would therefore like to thank you for your dedication and recognize the important contribution you have made to today's achievement. I would also like to thank the European Commission for presenting what I believe is a historic communication. For the first time, as we already heard, the European Union has adopted a comprehensive framework dedicated specifically to islands, to the European islands. This is not something that happened overnight. It reflects years of advocacy by many partners, including the European Committee of the Regions, to mention one communication on the EU Strategy for Islands, which reflects years of joint advocacy by the European Committee of the Regions. That was an opinion on enhancing cohesion policy support for regions with geographic and demographic handicaps, Article 174 TFEU in December 2022 by my colleague and friend, Madame Maupertus. The European Parliament, we already heard Honorable Bayada speaking about his opinion about the island authorities and territorial networks such as INSULEUR, and all of whom has constantly called for a dedicated European framework capable of addressing the structural realities of insularity. Today, we are seeing the result of that collective effort. When I was appointed rapporteur just a few days ago, many people asked me, what will your opinion say? My answer has always been very simple. It is still too early to answer that question. Because today is not the end of the process. Today is the beginning. I strongly believe that my responsibility is not simply to draft my opinion. My responsibility is to build our opinion. An opinion that reflects the voices of Europe's islands. An opinion that is evidence-based. An opinion that is ambitious, but above all, a people-based opinion. An opinion built with islands rather than simply about islands. One aspect that of the Commission's communication particularly caught my attention. For the first time, it is explicitly introduces into the European policy debate the concept of the cost of insularity. We already heard a lot about it. This is much more than a new expression. It represents recognition that islands face permanent structural costs that cannot simply be measured by using mainland indicators. By acknowledging this reality and announcing further work to analyze these costs, the Commission has opened an important avenue towards policies that are better adapted to island territories. I believe this is one of the most significant conceptual developments of this strategy. The role of the Committee of the Regions now becomes particularly important. Our opinion should not simply comment on the strategy. It should strengthen it. It should ensure that the experience of local and regional authorities, the level of government closest to our citizens, is fully reflected in the European debate. Because islands are not governed from Brussels. They are lived every day by our communities. As a rapporteur, I believe we should remain particularly attentive to two priorities during the months ahead. The first, consistency. The strategy does not exist in isolation. It is closely linked with many other European initiatives concerning cohesion policy, connectivity, competitiveness, innovation, energy, climate resilience, and quality of life. We therefore need to ensure that this future initiative genuinely reflects the island realities. In other words, we must continue advancing the principle of islands proofing across the European policy making. The second priority is delivery. Strategies only matter if they improve people's life. The proposed national and regional partnership plans offer an important opportunity. However, they can only succeed if local and regional authorities are fully involved, not only during implementation, but already during design, monitoring, and evaluation. This is fully consistent with the Committee of Regions' long-standing commitment to multi-level governance and place-based policy making. When we discuss the future of multi-annual financial framework, MFF, the debate should not focus only how much funding is available. It should also focus on how that funding is governed and delivered. Good governance is just as important as adequate resources. This brings me to the way I intend to prepare the Committee of the Regions' opinion. I do not to begin by writing. I intend to begin by listening. During the coming months, I want to meet as many islands communities as possible, local authorities, regional governments, national governments, businesses, academics, civil societies, young people, European institutions, islands networks, and of course, organizations as INSULEUR. I also look forward to working closely with the COR Islands Intergroup, whose members have long championed islands issues and whose collective experience will be invaluable throughout this process. Today's workshops is therefore much more than another conference. For me, it is the beginning of the consultation process. I am here above all to listen, to understand your priorities, to hear your concerns, to learn from your experience. Because your expertise, particularly regarding competitiveness, entrepreneurship, and the daily realities faced by the island businesses, is essential if this opinion is to respond to real needs. Although I come from Gozo, the opinion is not about Gozo. It is not about Corsica. It's not about the Balearic Islands. It's not about the Greek islands. It is about every island in Europe. My ambition is that once this opinion is adopted, every island community will be able to recognize part of itself within it. I would also like to make one personal commitment. Throughout this process, I want to maintain an open dialogue, not only with institutions, but also with citizens. I believe that European policymaking becomes stronger when people understand how it is being built and feel that they have genuinely contributed to it. This is why I hope we can build not only an evidence-based opinion, but also a people-based opinion. Allow me to conclude with one final reflection. I come from the island of Gozo, a small island in the Mediterranean, perhaps one of the smallest islands represented today on this virtual table. Yet today, Gozo has been entrusted with leading the Committee of the Regions works on an opinion that concerns all European islands. To me, this sends a powerful message. In Europe, size does not determine importance. Ideas do. Partnership does. Listening does. And solidarity does. Over the coming months, I will visit islands, I will meet communities, I will listen carefully, because before writing a European opinion, I first want to hear Europe's islands. Thank you very much.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, κύριε Φορμόζα. Είμαστε και για σας σίγουροι 100% ότι έχουμε πέσει στα καλύτερα χέρια. Δεν είναι η πρώτη φορά που η Επιτροπή των Περιφερειών τοποθετείται επί των νησιωτικών ζητημάτων. Θυμάμαι ότι η κυρία μου Περτουή εδώ και κάποια χρόνια είχε κάνει ήταν εισηγήτρια μιας γνωμοδότησης για την επιχειρηματικότητα των νησιών, οπότε έχετε στα χέρια σας και δικές σας γνωμοδοτήσεις του παρελθόντος, αλλά είμαστε σίγουροι ότι και στα χέρια των συναδέλφων που είναι στον Κότζο, του επιμελητηρίου του Κότζο, τον πρόεδρο τον Μάικελ Γκαλέα, τον κύριο Τζο Μπορ, τον Ντάνιελ Μπορ κλπ, ότι θα έχετε από εμάς οποιαδήποτε βοήθεια χρειαστείτε. Ευχαριστώ πολύ ακόμη μια φορά και τέλος, δυστυχώς ο χρόνος μας πιέζει πάρα πολύ και θα ήθελα λίγο την συγκατάθεση των διερμηνέων. Πάμε στην Μαρία Γκασές Σιραμών, που είναι η Executive Secretary της Επιτροπής των Νησιών της EPMR, αδελφός οργανισμός, μαζί πάντα σε όλα τα πεδία των μαχών, των ευρωπαϊκών μαχών εννοώ. Οπότε θα την παρακαλέσω να είναι σύντομη και αν υπάρχει λίγος χρόνος να δώσουμε το λόγο σε κάποιον από το audience αν χρειαστεί. Ευχαριστώ.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Yeah, indeed, it's a bit tricky to be the last speaker, not only because of the time constraints, but also because a lot of things have already been made. So I try to adapt a little bit my speaking points. But well, first of all, thank you, INSULEUR, for inviting us in this important discussion. Still, something I believe it's worth to repeat is that we also share the opinion highlighted by previous speakers on the fact that unfortunately the strategy falls short in proposing a mechanism to more systematically integrate insularity in EU policies. So what we call the island proofing, and the fact that the strategy is mostly relying on existing instruments rather than proposing substantial new actions and funding. But this being said, the big message here is that the strategy seems to be more a diagnosis exercise, right, rather than proposing concrete actions and adapted legislation, funding, or opportunities for islands and also for island businesses. I would like to simply highlight 3 areas, 3 blocks, where we believe that this translation from recognition to adapted legislation, funding, and opportunities needs to accelerate on the basis of what we have now on the table. First, I would like to start by linking competitiveness with the cost of insularity. Of course, we know that the structural disadvantages that island businesses are faced with is something they cannot fight against by themselves. And this is why we very much welcome the fact that the strategy recognizes the cost of insularity and commits to further analyzing it. But here, first thing I have to flag, many of our member regions have already developed with their sectors, with their universities, many good studies report on the cost of insularity. So it's something for what we have already quite good empirical and evidence on our hands. And rather, instead of keep analyzing it, what we believe important is to go to the next natural step, which would be to translate this recognition into the rules. And state aid rules here are probably one good example, one area where we have a big room for improvement to tailor it better to islands' reality. State aid is one of the main instruments that islands have in their hands in order to compensate for the permanent additional costs that insularity creates. And of course, we already have very concrete proposals for when the Commission will be looking at the revision of these state aid frameworks. I'm sure that for the audience today, the de minimis regulation will strongly resonate. The fact that these rules are still not adapted to the permanent transport and logistic costs that island companies face, this resulting in the fact that island businesses exhaust the de minimis aid ceiling much faster than mainland companies. So here, for instance, we could propose either exempting island territories from the standard ceiling shared with mainland territories, or at the very least introducing higher ceilings. So I don't want to get too concrete, just one example of where we see we need some adaptation. But in short, the message is the recognition of cost of insularity is on the table now as something that exists, that can be quantified. We already knew about it. And now this recognition should be reflected in the rules. And for us, state aid is one of the areas where we should start acting as a priority. My second point is tackling connectivity, of course, because it directly impacts the competitiveness of our territories. Maritime and air transport for islands is not only another economic activity, it's the essential or the condition that makes every other economic activity possible. So we see with positive eyes, let's say, the commitment of the strategy to assess island-specific provisions in reviews of the Fuel EU Maritime, Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, and particularly the Emission Trading System, the ETS. Here I would like to share with you that recently the Islands Commission of the CPMR sent a letter to the Commission, and also we developed some internal reflection on the upcoming ETS revision. I know that some MEPs are very much aligned as well with this, but we basically identified 3 recommendations. First, as the current derogations related to the islands, maritime and aviation connections for islands should continue beyond 2030, where they are due to expire, if indeed the disadvantages that they face are permanent. So we believe that the reason that justifying them are still in place. Second, that this ETS revision, notably because it's assessing the expansion of the system in the maritime and aviation sector, should be supported by proper territorial impact assessment that is specifically measuring the impacts that this extension would have for islands, but not only looking at from the angles of emissions, also looking at accessibility, affordability, competitiveness, and territorial continuity. These are all important aspects and angles when we're discussing about expanding ETS in island territories. And third, ETS, Fuel EU Maritime, other decarbonization measures and frameworks should be assessed together when we are looking at the impacts for islands, because they have indeed cumulative effects that matter much more than the instruments individually. So here the message is very clear. We support, of course, the climate ambition, the EU climate ambition, but territorial cohesion is also a must. If we do not adapt the legislation, this territorial discontinuity, this island dimension, we don't bring it to the decarbonization measures and frameworks, then islands will continue to be penalized disproportionately for this transition. Final comment is on implementation. Obviously, we get a lot this question from our members and other organizations. Does this strategy come with money? Clearly, the strategy relies a lot on the national and regional partnership plans as the main instrument to translate these priorities in investments. I thought about sharing some concerns about this, but I think it has been already tackled by previous speakers. So I'm just going to say I'm happy that we share the same view. So maybe what I would like to clarify is one different point. During the public presentation of the strategy, the first press conference that Executive Vice President Fito did a couple of weeks ago, he suggested that a significant share of future support for islands could come through the NRPP's pre-allocation to destined to less developed regions. But I wanted just to flag here to say that we have to be careful with this, because with a quick check of the category of regions in the next MFF, we realize that many European islands will not be classified as less developed regions for the 28-37 MFF period. Islands such as Malta, Cyprus, Corsica, Balearic Islands, Gotland, Bornholm, Sarema fall within transition or more developed regions, so relying primarily on pre-allocation for less developed regions risks overlooking a substantial share of Europe's island territories that would be overlooked by this funding. Maybe to conclude, as it was also highlighted by Ms. Mariano, we also see a clear link between islands, the strategy for islands, and the upcoming right to state strategy. So here, very quickly to say that from the perspective of islands, we believe the right to state cannot simply mean maintaining essential services. It must be a clear vision to create the conditions for competitiveness, business, quality jobs, innovation, entrepreneurship, so that young people can really have the genuine right to choose to build their futures on their islands, no? And that remind that, according to Enrico Letta, the concept is not, or the objective should not be ultimately the right to stay, but rather the genuine freedom to stay against the freedom to move. And here again insist on the fact that these reflections, these strategies cannot be detached from the reflection around the future MFF framework. So to conclude, just take a moment to thank the European Commission for the work done, also to INSULEUR, our member regions, some of them, I see some familiar faces connected, for the work done and how they have contributed to make this EU strategy for islands a reality. It's a first step, still shy step, but in the right direction. And I'm sure that in the coming months, with upcoming opinions of different institutions and our own work, advocacy and lobby work, we will improve this strategy and make sure that it delivers real opportunities for Europe Islands economy. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, Μαρία, για την εξαιρετική παρέμβαση. Ειλικρινά θεωρώ ότι είστε πάρα πολύ διαβασμένοι και έχετε μια οραματική προσέγγιση για τα νησιά, έτσι όπως είχαμε και εμείς 25 χρόνια πριν όταν ιδρύθηκε το INSULEUR, γιατί θεωρούμε ότι δεν είναι μόνο ένα πρόβλημα πολιτικής συνοχής, είναι πολύ κάτι παραπάνω. Θεωρούμε ότι η πολιτική, μάλλον η ευρωπαϊκή πολιτική για τα νησιά πρέπει να είναι μια ολοκληρωμένη πολιτική για τα νησιά, με τον clause of insularity και να παίζει σε διάφορες πολιτικές οριζόντια, όχι μόνο στην κοινωνική συνοχή. Και πάλι εκφράζω τον ενθουσιασμό μου για σας και είμαι σίγουρος ότι θα σας έχουμε κοντά μας. Τώρα, η ώρα έχει περάσει. Δεν δώσαμε το λόγο δυστυχώς σε κανέναν από τους συμμετέχοντες. Εάν μας επιτρέψουν οι διερμηνείς και υπάρχει ένας ή δύο που θέλουν μια μικρή παρέμβαση, ας το κάνουμε παρακαλώ. Υπάρχει κάποιος που θα ήθελε να μιλήσει, να πατήσει το χεράκι στο Zoom?
Είναι ο κύριος Μελέας και στο chat.
Ο κύριος Μελέας. Ελάτε. Γιώργο, αγαπητέ Γιώργο. Δεν με ακούει. Ειρήνη.
Do I have a chance to say something?
Yes, please.
Yes, okay, thank you. I couldn't agree more with Mr. Bayara's doubts about operationalization of the strategy. We are talking about draft strategies, so it will be improved, we all hope, but there are points in the strategy that has been addressed sometimes vaguely. Three of them should be kind of pointed out. It's about island proofing, which is tackled there, but no operational response is offered or proposed how to do it. There is island data and statistics, which is also mentioned, but no operational response has been offered. And above all, governance and implementation mechanisms. I think that here this statistic is probably the starting and the main problem, because we all face an island statistical invisibility. Most of the islands of Europe are archipelagos that are stretched along the coast, and very few islands have their own municipalities. Most of the islands are parts of the mainland municipalities, and all the statistics is gathered and published on the level of a municipality, which means that the islands are statistically buried in the municipal statistics. So we simply don't know where to start, and we do not know the development level of islands because we cannot measure it. Someone talked about development indicators, stating that they are mainland indicators, which is unacceptable, and so on. But we don't have statistics for this. No, we have any operational guidelines to governance and implementing mechanism on the island level. If there is a road towards better island policy and so on, we don't know where we are. We are simply groundless. Thank you.
Ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, κύριε Στάκ, για την παρέμβασή σας. Πράγματι έχετε δίκιο. Όλη η στατιστική της Eurostat αυτή τη στιγμή βασίζεται σε επίπεδο NUTS 2, δηλαδή σε επίπεδο περιφερειών, και όχι σε επίπεδο NUTS 3 που είναι νησιά. Σας ενημερώνω όμως ότι το INSULEUR πρόσφατα έχει πάρει μια πρωτοβουλία να προχωρήσει σε ένα κεφάλαιο στατιστικό που μας αφορά, που είναι η δημογραφία των επιχειρήσεων, σε επίπεδο NUTS 3. Το δουλεύουμε εσωτερικά, η κυρία Σωτηρίου το δουλεύει και νομίζω ότι θα έχουμε γρήγορα αποτελέσματα. Ευχαριστώ. Κάποιος άλλος, πριν κλείσουμε ακόμα ένας?
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So thank you very much for this. My name is Yurios Meleas. I'm working in the European Economic Social Committee. I just want to say again that all of you are invited on 16th of October, where we're going to have this hearing together with INSULEUR on the island of Syros. So please put it in your agenda. It will be very much welcome. Also, you, Mr. Formosa, from the European Committee of the Regions, I will send you also an invitation, but put it in your agenda. It will be important to have you all in this hearing.
Ωραία. Και με αυτή την ευχάριστη νότα, κύριε Μελέα, ευχαριστούμε πάρα πολύ, να κλείσουμε το σημερινό μας workshop. Σας ευχαριστούμε όλους και σύντομα θα βρεθούμε πάλι στην επόμενη συνάντηση, που για να ευχαριστήσω και την τελευταία ομιλία, τη Μαρία, το θέμα που σκεφτόμαστε να συζητήσουμε στα Γκραν Κανάρια είναι το δικαίωμα, the right of stay και επιχειρήσεις, το δικαίωμα παραμονής και επιχειρήσεις. Είναι ένα είναι ένα θέμα που μας αφορά πάρα πολύ τα νησιά, περισσότερο δηλαδή και τις αποκεντρωμένες περιοχές και ειδικότερα τα απομακρυσμένα νησιά όπως τα Γκραν Κανάρια κλπ. Δίνω το λόγο στον πρόεδρο του INSULEUR να κλείσει τη συνεδρία.
Ναι, ήθελα να πω ότι η τηλεδιάσκεψη πράγματι έχει ένα άχαρο ρόλο. Θελήσαμε να κάνουμε μια ενημέρωση για να μπούμε σε μια λογική, να καταλάβουμε τι είναι αυτό το πρώτο βήμα που έγινε στην Κύπρο που παρουσιάστηκε, και θα προσπαθήσουμε να οργανώσουμε με φυσική παρουσία πλέον, να είμαστε όλοι καλά, τον Νοέμβριο, μια πιο ανοιχτή συζήτηση που θα μπορούν όλοι να πάρουν το λόγο και να έχουμε τη δυνατότητα να ανταλλάξουμε απόψεις σε πιο ήρεμες συνθήκες και από κοντά face to face. Πιστεύω να υπήρξε μια πρώτη ενημέρωση, αλλά θα προσπαθήσουμε και στην πορεία τις επόμενες μέρες να δώσουμε μια πιο πλήρη επαφή με όλα τα μέλη μας για αυτό που έχει ξεκινήσει. Σας ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ και καλή σας νύχτα.
Ιδιαίτερες ευχαριστίες στους διερμηνείς. Ευχαριστούμε για την υπομονή.
Ευχαριστούμε, Πρόεδρε. Γεια σας.
Ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Καλό βράδυ σε όλους σας.
Γεια σας. Γεια σας.
Bye.
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 Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Χαρητήρια. Ευχαριστούμε.
Και
εισάλαμε υγεία.
Ciao.
Bye. Thank you.
Γεια σου, Γκαετάνο. Ciao, ciao. Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao Antonio.
Alla prossima, Cristina.
Bye bye.
Bye.
See you. Bye bye. Thank you.